Greetings. My name is Professor Divine Ahaji of the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, and I am the winner of the 2020 Emerald Real Impact Award, driving the impact agenda. Since I won the award in 2020, this is the first time I'm coming out on the what I really did in terms of winning the award, and then also linking it to issues relating to research in academia, to benefit society. At this point, I'm not going to speak much about the award because there are already a lot of YouTube and published articles by Emerald Publishing online that you may choose to read. But just to say that it's important for us to understand the whole issue about the Impact Award, which is trying to see how research can be diffused into society for that needed impact to cause change. That is what impact is all about. And so here, if you want to talk about the definition of impact, I will still go by the Emerald Publishing definition, which is research causing change in society, in terms of the positive impact and making creative benefit for the community. And so when we talk about impact, it's not about what happens to research in academia in terms of the publishing, and also perhaps using the findings to teach students, and sometimes relying on the findings to do consultancy job, which is good anyway. But impact is research leaving academia and really being felt in the society. And this is important because according to the literature, it is established that academic research can generally take about 17 to 20 years before it gets into the public. So if you are going to wait just merely by publishing in academic journals, as academics are required to do, then it means that the findings of your research will really be felt in 2 decades down the line, or 20 years, down the line. And that is what, as academics, we need to have a deliberate effort in terms of deliberate action, trying to shorten that gap, by deliberately devising means by which your research findings can get into the society and also make the relevant impact. And so that is what the impact agenda is all about, and this is what I've been trying to do with my research over the years, which led me to winning the Real Impact Award. And today I want to speak on an issue related to sources of knowledge, which is actually the foundation of all that we're going to be witnessing over the coming couple of weeks on this Driving the Impact Agenda channel. When we talk about sources of knowledge, it's all about where we get our information from in terms of knowledge, and then disseminate it in terms of using it to benefit society, which is derived from the wisdom in application. So we have the knowledge, and its application, when used wisely, becomes a source of wisdom. So I just recently published an article, I think it was out today, on myjoyonline.com, and the title is "Where do you derive your source of knowledge from? A scholarly reflection." It's basically based on the literature, and today I want to take us through the common sources of knowledge and why it is important to understand this, because as humans, the source of knowledge that we derive is actually what defines our behavior and personality. And so it informs all the decisions that we take, whether for individual, collective, or national purposes. And so it's critical. You need to understand these sources of knowledge to be able to make meaningful uptake with them. So number one, we have what we call authority. We have what we call tradition. We have knowledge coming from experience. Knowledge coming from common sense. Knowledge coming from media myth, and then also it might surprise maybe some people, but then science. So when actually we talk about sources of knowledge, these are some of the common, and one popular social research textbook by Krieger and Newman actually conforms to these six that I've mentioned: authority, tradition, experience, common sense, media myth, and then science. And so authority, well, even as you have your professors and teachers teaching you, there are people who are in this position that you respect, and so you tend to believe what they teach you, just like our parents and also peers might tell us a lot of things which, and as you know, as we are children growing up, our parents told us a lot of things in a position of authority, and we believe them, although it's also possible that there are a number of them that now you don't actually believe, which means that authority is good, it can also be subjected to exaggeration and other things which can turn out to be not properly verified along the line. The same with tradition, which is knowledge actually based on past practices, and also we can put religion also in that perspective, which are all sources of knowledge but based on past practices. And it may have served some purposes then, but as to whether they are verified or have ever been verified are the issues that we are talking about in terms of sources of knowledge. As you may know, religion is actually has been the basis for trying to understand our natural world several centuries ago, going to the medieval era. But it turns out that it could not stand the test of time, and then science had to take over. We have experience, which is normally our personal experiences, which is also very good and can be a source of knowledge, because you get an experience and you transfer it to another person. But the issue is that experience can also suffer from limitations in terms of exaggeration and in terms of what we call one textbook we call premature closure, and then also we have selective observation. So the person may choose to tell you what he or she deems fit, and suppress others based on then we have common sense, which is something that is natural to human beings, that we are all expected to know, and then which is also a source of knowledge. But then it is also established that knowledge from common sense can be contradictory, and one professor actually is it I think Kruger and Newman says that it can lead to what we call illogical fallacies, because you can get, for instance, common sense which has been turned into wise sayings in countries like Proverbs. You find out that you can have one proverb supporting an argument, and at the same time you can get another proverb which is defeating, or wise saying defeating the argument. So that is contradictory. Then we have media myth, which is something that occurs when you watch movies, television, reading tabloids, and then you tend to believe those stories and use it as a basis for decision making, and it happens. But then, as you all know, these are for entertainment, and also they can be exaggerated for particular purposes in terms of promotional purposes. And so whilst we are saying that all these sources of knowledge might have something useful in them, it is equally true that one needs to be very careful in terms of using them firmly, because many a time when it comes to issues of verification, it becomes difficult. And so that is why, especially since the era of Socrates, Plato, and then Aristotle, the pathway was developed for science to be the source of knowledge. And when we say science here, the argument is that as humans, we should be able to have the means to be able to understand the natural world and things happening around us, or we should be able to devise means which will help us to understand instead of relying on external source. In this case, the external source could be tradition, and especially as religion was used in the past to explain many of the things in the natural world. The philosophy of science is that let's leave that now and believe in the human being, that the human being can devise means to be able to understand these things. And that is why that is actually the basis of science in terms of the philosophy as it started several centuries ago. And so we have all these sources of knowledge, but the issue is which do we rely on in terms of credibility and verification, especially as a modern society. And this is where we are, or the conundrum that we are all faced with, especially those of us in Africa and let's say Ghana, my own country, where we are torn between whether policies and national discourse should be driven by religion or tradition, or it should be driven by science. We are not saying, I'm not saying they are useless and should be dismissed outright. But what we are saying is that they have not stood the test of time. They can be used in supporting in a supporting role, but when it comes to the real decisions, science should have to take the center stage, as it has proven, especially in the Western world, and has become actually the mantra for progressive societies all over the world. And so, in light of that, I've been trying to more or less push this agenda for the academic environment and the society to begin to understand why we need to tread cautiously in terms of how we are using knowledge or the sources of knowledge in this country, relying on those which are more or less very difficult to verify, and using that to champion our agenda whilst relegating science to the background. And so even in the academic environment, I've recently written another article which was targeting our educational institutions in terms of whether we should allow socio-political ideology to override scientific thinking in our academic institutions. And so that was also published on my joint inline. I think the title is should socio-political ideology be encouraged in the ivory tower, a research ethics perspective. And I will encourage our university students and tertiary students to actually read this, because it brings very critical issues as to whether when you are faced with decision making, you should be focusing on scientific theory to make your argument, or it should be based on socio-political ideology, especially in the light of the fact that the campuses are now more or less divided into political positions with TESCON, TAIN, and other on campuses. So the situation is, if issues are supposed to be discussed from a scientific perspective, will the students actually be bold enough to be able to discuss it in that way, or they will be overridden by their political ideology and thoughts? And so far as academic freedom is required, students in the academic environment are supposed to use scientific rigor, irrespective of what is at stake, to make their arguments. And then coming to the national perspective, I recently also wrote another article trying to question why the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences is not, for instance, a constitutionally mandated body advising the president, because if we are a nation that believes in the science and technology mantra, it behoves that there should be structures in place to show that right from the basic school going, science is actually the basis for decision making. And so it should reflect at the top, so that even the students at the bottom will appreciate that the reason why they are doing these things or learning these things in school is that it is going to reflect in society. But if all these things are being taught in terms of the position of teaching students critical thinking and the rest, but it is not reflecting in society at the top, then it means that we are creating a very imbalanced society in education system, which can really affect our thinking and also nation building, as collectively we are all trying to do. And in this context, I will want to say that there's an article written by one professor, Professor Bernstein. I hope I've mentioned the name correctly, 2009. And there's this concept of the DIKW issue of knowledge philosophy, which is data, information, knowledge, and then wisdom. In some other literature, you have U also introduced, that is DIKUW, where the U is for understanding. And it is established that for most people, data is in abundance and it's processed into information, into knowledge and understanding, but wisdom is virtually nil. And I think this is very, very critical. It means that you will need data to be able to process into information, process into knowledge and understanding, and that is what is going to lead you to wisdom, which is what happens in the real life in the application of the knowledge. And the literature in management science is suggesting that for most people, data might be about 40%, information maybe also in that category, knowledge also in that category of 40%, and then understanding. Then wisdom perhaps is about 10%, or as I'm saying, limited. So what it means is that the issue of knowledge being diffused and transferred into wisdom is a very critical thing that decides actually how nations are going to progress in life. And I'll leave it to the public to judge, especially in our environment and also in the African perspective, whether we have been able to use science as a knowledge to help us in our development. So, ladies and gentlemen, at this juncture, as I said earlier, this is all about driving the impact agenda, where we want to see research actually permeating into society to be able to make the impact, to cause the change in the society. But then, as a beginning to all this episode, which we are going to have in a series, we have tried today look at the sources of knowledge, because it is actually the foundation of everything that we're doing. And we have looked at the types or the common types of the sources of knowledge, and how they can influence our behavior, and the fact that science is actually the way to go, because science is open, is neutral, and follows a systematic, diligent approach in terms of knowledge building, whilst the others, especially religion and tradition, are rooted in belief and dogmatic and fixed, to the extent that when there is even a superior evidence, this will still want to remain at the status quo. Unlike that, however, science will tend to be neutral, and also whenever there is a superior decision, science will tend to align with that. And if as a nation we believe that where we are, we still have to, which for some of us we really think that there needs to be a rethink, that there is the need for us to be able to make sure that science becomes a centered stage in our discussion in the country. And here we are not saying science in the sense that it is only academics who are involved. Science is about a systematic, diligent approach to problem solving, and it can be undertaken at all levels of society. And so, at every level, people can be trained to be able to use scientific principles to understand issues, and also in terms of questioning knowledge, so that we can have a very consistent way of evaluating our country's development agenda for the benefit of all of us. And so I'll be coming back in the next time, and I'll be referring you to some of the papers that I've written. So you can go online, they are all there. Where do you derive your source of knowledge from? It's already published. Should socio-political ideology be encouraged in the ivory tower? That's a research ethics perspective. That is also already published on my joint online. And then, why is the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences not a constitutionally mandated body advising the president. These are useful works that I think will help all of us. Thank you very much.